Hi everyone, and welcome to my next video tutorial, which is going to be focused on implementing Django Smart rate limit within our applications so that we can efficiently integrate rate limiting within our projects. Now, I have made a video on this a few years ago on rate limiting. However, I am going to go a little bit deeper into this new library here, which we can utilize. And I'm going to go deeper also into some of the specific configurations that you can set up. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so first of all, just make sure that you have a project which you can apply this to. I have a very simple one here up and running. So what you're then going to want to do is go ahead and install that particular library within your project. So I'm just going to say pip install Django-smart-rate limit. Okay, there we go, we've got that installed. And there are a few things that we do need to set up in our project, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is go to our settings.py file. Okay, and we can go ahead and scroll down to our list of installed apps here. So on the default here, as you can see, I have a default app called CRM, just for clarity. And we're then just going to go ahead and add in Django_smart_rate limit. Okay, then what you want to do is you want to set up your rate limit backend. Now, according to the documentation, what you can do is if you want to go a little bit more advanced, is you can go on ahead and set this up accordingly with Redis itself. So if you want to utilize Redis, you can go ahead and set up that configuration. But to begin with, so I'm just going to keep it simple, and we're going to use our default SQLite database here just as a test for now. So we can go ahead and say rate limit underscore backend. And we can just set that to database, and that's going to sync with our SQLite database. All right, so remember, if you want to use Redis, all you need to do is just configure the following here. And of course, there will be a few nuances you need to keep in mind, but just to keep it on the default, we're just going to use our Django database, which is SQLite. Right, now we can just make our migration. So we can say python manage.py make migrations. There we go. Then you can say python manage.py migrate. Okay, there our migrations have been made. All right, so that is the basics that you need to set up in order to get everything integrated and working accordingly into play. All right, so now that we have set up the fundamentals, let's get started. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is, if we look at the documentation here, is we want to apply the usage. So we're going to import a rate limit decorator, which is going to be applied to the view in which we want to enforce rate limiting. Now we can either set this based on IP-based rate limiting, so that's kind of the default. That's seen as IP-based, so that basically means any user that's connecting to our application that has a valid IP address, so anyone on the internet basically. Then we have user-based rate limiting, which pertains to signed-in users within our application. So it generally makes sense here to set your IP-based rate limiting, which is for everyone, on all of the views that your logged-in users are not current, that your logged-in users aren't specifically logged into. So IP-based rate limiting for basically all particular views that we have that don't require user authentication. And then for user authentication, it makes sense to add in user-based rate limiting, which applies to your logged in users. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, a few years ago when I made a video on this rate limiting here, I utilize user or IP rate limiting together, which of course is effective, but I feel it's a lot cleaner to do it separately. So there are a few additional things here with this library, like I mentioned, that I'm going to also dive into, which is going to set up rate limiting accordingly across all of your views here, according to special middleware as well, which is something new that I also want to focus on. Okay, but in any case, let's go ahead and get started. So we want to import the rate limit decorator. and I'm going to go to my Django app called CRM, to my views.py file, and I'm just going to paste it in like that. So import rate limit. Then I want to apply this to my home page, which is of course right here, and I want to ensure I have rate limiting in place. Now the default here is 100 requests per hour on this particular view that we attach it to. So you'll be able to make 100 requests every hour before it locks that page, enforcing rate limiting. It also has minutes as well, so you can say 100 per minute, and just for testing, I'd recommend you follow along with me for that. And this is how we can set up IP-based rate limiting, which is essentially default rate limiting. And we're going to set this to 10 requests per minute based on IP. So let's reload the terminal so we can see it's reloaded. Go back and let's test it out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There we go. Rate limit exceeded. Please try again later. And we can see we got the error message in our terminal that says too many requests. And that was, of course, when we tried to instantiate an 11th request, which of course bypasses it. And we can see this particular view is now locked. Now it only applies to this view. So in other words, if I wanted to go to the registration view, I can easily do so by saying register, and it's perfectly fine. You can see here it's not doing anything. So that's also a nifty way to ensure you have rate limiting specifically on a view. Now let's go back and we can see it still says rate limit exceeded. So it's going to keep on saying rate limit exceeded until we allow the cool off of 1 minute to be passed without making requests. Because each time you do this is just going to restart that rate limit each and every time. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is wait a solid minute before attempting to reload this particular page. So let's just wait for a solid minute also. All right, so let's reload now, and we can see it's now reset and we're good to go. All right, so for the time being, what I'm going to do is just remove this right here and reload again. So we don't have any restrictions for now. All right, so we've got that set IP-based rate limiting. Now let's add in user-based rate limiting. This is going to be particular to a user. So if you have an application that takes in users with registration and logging in capability, let's do that. So I'm just going to register a test user. So I'm going to say here T user, and I'm going to say 1. T user 1 at mail. And it's in a password. Okay. Okay, so as soon as I'm logged in, okay, I'm on my dashboard, we can then go ahead and apply this specific rate limit here, which is according to a user. Okay, so again, let's go ahead and copy this. Make sure that you switch it out accordingly. So this will be on a page where my users will be. So here we have login required on the dashboard here. So this is the user view. I'm going to attach to that, and I'm going to say 15 per minute. Okay, and save, and that's going to be based on a user here. Okay, and let's now test this out. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, all the way to, there we go. So when it got to about the 16th request, it went ahead and set the following. Okay, now of course we can test this out. So if I were to go to my home page, we can see that is unaffected. The registration page is unaffected. And of course the login page is unaffected. But if I go to my dashboard, we can see it's still affected. All right, so that's how we can set it for the user. So it's a bit more appropriate here to set the rate limit here when you are working with the users. And that is just how you can set that up as is. So that's just the, how can I say, the best practice to go about it, to set one up for users and IP based. Okay. All right, so that is the basic usage. Now, something that I do want to cover in greater detail now is how we can go on ahead and set this up in accordance with the middleware which we can set up. So what I want to do is just add in the middleware. As you can see, there's a lot of things that you can add in here with documentation, but I just want to add in the middleware instead. So here we go. So with the middleware configuration here, you can set a default rate limit, as we can see here. And you can also set individual rate limits according to the URL. So you don't necessarily have to set them up for the views themselves, as we've done here. You don't need to do that. You can just go ahead and configure it one time in the middleware, and then you just specify the parameters and configuration. So this is the deeper dive that I actually wanted to show in this video in actual detail as to what you can set. Now, there is a few nuances to keep in mind here, but we'll get to that in a moment. I just want to refresh now, and there we go. Just clean. Let's remove this, and we're good to go. And now I also want to open up the settings.py file. And we want to now go deeper into that. So I'll just log out here. And let's continue. All right, so let's get started. So what we want to do is set up our middleware. So we can go to our settings.py file. Here's the list of middleware, and we can just go ahead and add in Django Smart Rate Limit middleware. Just copy that, and we can just paste that at the end. That's fine. Just make sure you add in a comma here at the end. There we have it. Then we can add in this rate limit middleware here. You can just copy it as is. Okay, and here we go. So we can set a default rate middleware, and that's going to be across our entire application. So before we set up this individual rate limits here, we can actually remove this. And I'm going to set M, and I'm going to set this as 10. So let's set default rate for the middleware as 10 per minute, and that's going to be enacted across all of our URLs in our application completely. So make sure you save everything, reload, and that's in play now. So now if I attempt to do anything, let's say it's reload 10 times or 11, there we go, it's blocked. Now if I go to register, it's blocked as well. If I go to my login, blocked as well. And let's go back, it's blocked. Okay, so this is how you can apply it to your entire application by setting a default rate. And then we're going to look at how we can set it for individual URLs. So in the meantime, we can open up our urls.py file, and I can see you've got that. Wrong one, actually. It should be the app level. So the app level urls.py file. There we have it. So we have register, login, dashboard, for example, and we're going to do it for that. So site-wide, you can just say default rate, and then we can see 10 /m for 10, of course, requests per minute, and that's going to be set based on whichever view you're on of your application. It's going to restart. So if I reload this page here, we can see it's okay. Now, there's something I want to mention here. So I've now gone ahead and refreshed. Okay, and it has 10. So if I were to go to register and go back, login, back, register, refresh a bit, back, login, refresh a few times, go back, register, you can see it says rate limit exceeded as well. So that is how I'm explaining here in terms of too many requests. So it carries over. So when you use this rate limit middleware, it's going to carry over the amount of requests. So you're going to want to set this very specific here to a specific number, because for each request, you're going to have a limit which saves in your database each particular time. Okay, so it carries over. And this also happens when you're doing it with your URLs as well. The rate limit carries over. Okay, so as you saw here, we went on and looked at all of these particular pages, and it saved each, how can I say it? It saved each request that we did as it was rate limiting. So register, my login, it saved all of this, and when it got to the 11th request, irrespective of the page, because this is site-wide rate limiting, it will carry on and add. Okay. So we just need to wait for it to restart, and then I'm going to show you with the rate limits here for individual URLs. Now again, it's also going to, how can I say, carry on an add. Okay, so we'll get to that in a moment as well. Right, so all we need to do is just wait for it to clean up. And what I'm going to do in the meantime is I'm also going to make this default rate higher as well. So we have a default rate at the maximum. So let's reload it. Okay, we're good. All right, now I'm going to set this to something quite high. I'll just set this to 10,000 per hour so it doesn't interfere with what we're doing next. Okay, now for the individual URLs. What we can do is essentially set it up accordingly. So I'll just copy this as an example. And we need to actually have this. So rate limits. So this is what we need for individual URLs. Just make sure you got your commas in play. And let's see what we have. So let's say on my registration page, okay, that's just going to be, of course, we can set this to /register. And then let's go on ahead and set one also for, let's say, the login page as well. So my-login. Okay, I'm going to set this as a maximum of 10 per minute, and here the login 15 per minute. Make sure you save that. Okay, and the default rate is site-wide irrespective of which URL you do. So if we were to go on ahead and go to register, so we'll have 10 per minute. Okay, and let me go ahead and start refreshing up to 10 times. So let's do that. Okay, it's already been exceeded. So there we go, too many requests. Now, if I were to go to my login, which is 15, I will be able to access it, which is fine. Now, you'll notice even after a few, should I say, requests, it's going to add on what was set with register still. So I'll only be able to reload maybe a few times. There we go. So it's only like 2 or 3, and you're probably wondering why that is. It's because it carries over the amount of requests that have been rate limited before it has cooled down. So if everything's cooled down and you're on the login page here, you'll be able to access it 15 times with the requests. Okay, and the same goes for register. After the cooldown of a minute, okay, you'll have 10 tries to make requests. And after the 10 tries here have been exceeded, you will have noticed any other request that you make is going to add up. And all that happens here with this library is it's going to keep track of how many requests you've made site-wide. And this is like the tolerance level on the login page and the tolerance level on the register page, and it takes this account across all pages. Okay, it doesn't keep it based on 15 on the login page or 10 on the register page. So that's an important factor to keep in mind with what we're setting up, and the default rate is of course everywhere. And of course this also applies to these URLs, so do keep that in mind. It does add up, but you'll notice after that minute is up, you'll have 15, should I say, requests available if you were to attempt to set everything up accordingly on the login page. Okay, so if I were to reload and keep refreshing, okay, you can see here that I could go up to 16 tries. So let's see. Yeah, up to 16. And then, of course, it will just kick you out. But of course, if you're on the register page and you do it, you'll only have 10. But keep in mind, if you are moving from page to page, that limit is going to add on. Right? So I know it's very technical here, and I'm maybe over-explaining it, but it's something very specific to keep in mind. It took me a while to understand how this library works and how it keeps everything into account. Okay. But yes, that's a deeper dive into how you can use the middleware as the rate limiting. Of course, I find it very useful to have a site-wide default rate which you can apply, and also individually to URLs, with a little bit of a special tweak to understanding how they work, but it's very useful to have it in this kind of fashion. Of course, the regular way, which I explained last time, was focused on the decorators, and this time it's more on the middleware and individual URLs that you set, and default site-wide ones which you can set, which is helpful if you don't want to have to set a decorator on each and every view that you're working with. All right. Okay, so there we have it. All right, so that is how we can use Django Smart Rate Limit. Now, there is a lot more things that you can add in here in terms of course, as I mentioned before, you can use Redis instead. You can also use a multi-backend with failover as well. And of course, there's more information on response headers. You can also look at health checks, so you can check your backend health. And you can also get a detailed status on that as well. You can clean up your database, so you can clean up those rate limits as well. So for example, if I were to copy the following, and add that in, it's going to clean up all those entries that I have here for the rate limiting process. And of course, we can also check the health here of our backend in terms of the rate limit. And we can see the backend is healthy and it's in a good state, and we're using our database backend. Right, so quite a few more things you can look into, but that is the gist in which you can go ahead and set this up. And of course, a few use cases: mobile app synchronization, batch file processing, API retry mechanism. And you can also add this with the Django REST framework as well. You can see the process is quite similar. You would just add this to your view sets that you define. And as you can see, nested within that, you can just add in the rate limit as well accordingly. Alright, so that's it for this video tutorial. I know it was quite long, but there was quite a lot to dive into and explain. But that's it, guys. That's how you can go ahead and enforce rate limiting in a deeper dive. So as always, thank you for the support, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.